Okay, so we are really lucky to be joined not just at the ADTC conference in what is a matter of weeks, Saturday the 2nd of February, but also this evening by Paddy McGrath. Paddy is the head of education at TextHelp, and thank you for joining us, Paddy, just for this podcast to kind of give people a little flavour of what it is that TextHelp do and also about what we've got to look forward to in the actual conference from TextHelp and from yourself. So thank you for joining us, Paddy.
No, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Envious of the sunshine that I'm heading out to in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah, yeah, it's certainly a privilege being out here. So I thought in this kind of first session, Paddy, what we'd do is just establish what TextHelp is and why it was created and what it is that you do, because some people will know exactly what you do, but for others it might be quite a new thing to consider. So what is TextHelp and why was it created?
Yeah, sometimes, Todd, I think text help is like the world's best kept secret because some of us think, people think about us as an accessibility company or as an ed tech company and maybe don't realize the size and scope that we are. So, TextHelp as a company is known as an accessibility company. We're quite big. We have 220 million users of our tools globally. And these users are being facilitated through the software that we provide. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit later about the intricacies of the software. But the software is really designed to help with the mission that we have. And the mission that we have is to help everybody understand and be understood. So we make this accessibility software that means that if you need help with reading or you need help with writing or fundamental parts of literacy or maths, these software tools help them. So we're global as a company. Lots of brands around the world come underneath the Text Help umbrella that you may have come across and some of the tools that you may use. And we've actually been going now since 1996. So we're nearly at our 30th anniversary. So one of the think a little bit of the ed tech industry. And we started here, you probably tell from my accent, I'm an Irishman, a Belfast Irishman. So we started here in Northern Ireland back in 1986. And actually, the rationale behind starting the company originally was not in the things that we do very well now. For example, we're really well known for supporting dyslexia and reading challenges. But it was actually started because our founder at the time, his father had a stroke, and his father at that point in time lost the ability to form coherent speech. So our founder at that point then created a piece of software that would help articulate. So that's where text to speech came from, and still to this day, that's what we're very well known for. How do we take words on a page and provide a really good text to speech engine and allow our students to listen and to comprehend better as they go. So I suppose now forward fast from there, dyslexia is probably the thing we're most known about helping.
Wow. Yeah, so I mean you've talked a little bit there about the first product and how it helped people who needed that extra support to communicate and learn. And I mean I certainly didn't know that. That's a fascinating story. So that then spread out to obviously more than just his father and started to help a wider community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was quite simple back at the time where if you look at a typical classroom or you look at a set of adults and you look at the percentage of those adults that may have a challenge with expressing themselves verbally, speech and language challenges, that is a set of pupils and a set of people that of course we wanted to help. But then when you suddenly start to think a little more about inclusion and about what other struggles there might be that are related to that, you start to see things like dyslexia, and you start to see actually there's a lot of students actually either have dyslexic traits or maybe being formalized with dyslexia. So you start to see that you can move from helping that section of people with speech and language challenge, and now you can help with dyslexia. And now, as things have grown for us and those tools that have expanded, you start to see, well, how might we support autism? And whether literally you have an actual diagnosis or an assessment with autism, there are traits in all of us that demand us to be included in our learning. And so the tools are there to help things like that and ADHD. So how do we help pupils maybe focus better on their written work or on their work on screen when they're on a digital device? And so you end up actually starting at one point, but realizing that with the same tool, you can help a whole range of people. And that's really why when we're coming up to the conference, I talk an awful lot about inclusion. I like to say it's my middle name. It's because we never want to segment students, of course, and put them in one box and say, well, this tool helps you here. We go, right, this tool, if used by everybody, can genuinely help everybody to all various degrees and shapes. And that for me is a big driver for us. It's how do we actually include everybody and support everybody?
Yeah, because I suppose when we talk about you mentioned the word accessibility before, but we all have a barrier somewhere on some aspect of our learning and probably our life more generally. So, there's going to be some need for everybody, and it's just at varying levels and varying levels of support, I guess.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, I mean, I'm sitting talking to you, and I'm like wearing a bit of assistive technology. I'm wearing a pair of glasses. We normalize that. Without these glasses, I couldn't see you very well. I certainly couldn't read any notes. But equally, there's people that just need to pop on a set of glasses for reading glasses, and equally, there are people who don't need glasses. So when you start to think about it in those ways, we have managed to normalize that assistive piece in other areas of life, like spectacles, glasses. And we've started to realize that everybody's prescription is slightly different. Everybody's eye is slightly different. I'm an old man now. I've got varifocals, so I need to start looking at you like this.
Okay.
But it's very different than my wife's glasses, who doesn't have that. Now, she's only 2 years younger, just to be clear, but clearly she doesn't need it. But I think it's important to recognize and normalize that and realize I think we used when we used to think about accessibility, unfortunately, sort of the common approach to that accessibility was not really about inclusion. It was saying, right, there are four children in my classroom, right? They've all got dyslexia, and I use that term because that's how we used to talk about it.
Mm.
But if you take those pupils, then you'd go, right, well, the obvious thing to do is to help them with laptops or help them with a teaching assistant or classroom assistant. Or an LSA, and they would get that very specific help. But what that wouldn't necessarily do is include them with the rest of the class because not everybody had a laptop, not everybody had that special tool, not everybody had a teaching assistant. Start to normalize that and go, well, this is more about inclusion. This is about integrating those pupils in and realizing that of the four that have maybe been formally assessed with dyslexia, there might be another 10 in your classroom that will mask it, that will hide it, but so
Yeah.
could benefit from assistive technology. So if you mentioned the word accessibility, and I think that sometimes that gets confused with that's us fixing certain materials to be better for a subset of people or to let other people access it. And the argument about accessibility is if you make, say, a learning resource in a classroom more accessible, like I'll give you an example, you change the font on it just to make it
Mm.
more readable. The vast majority of people won't even notice that. Some people will benefit from it and some people will really need it. So if you put that accessibility layer in, and then you add on tools like we have at TextHelp, suddenly, again, you're back to the inclusion bit. Everybody starts to benefit from those changes that you start to make. And we're really passionate about genuinely education for everyone. How do you actually make those tiny changes and put those small changes in place in the tools and the sort of the processes and the way you design learning to make sure that you're not having to fix something afterwards. You're just doing it from a good baseline that everybody's got the support they need. So it's a big task, big challenge. Nobody does it perfectly, but we're on a mission to try and give them at the very least the tools to help them.
Yeah, it's funny you're triggering a memory for me there as we speak. A friend of mine, he had a similar name to somebody else at school, and he was placed in the bottom set. He wasn't, he was a fairly able young man, and he said it's funny the vast majority of the teaching was like really, really good. I learned a lot because it was very specific to how they were going to learn these information. He said, but then we went to a geography lesson and we just coloured in a map for an hour.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so that, historically, those were the sort of things that people did. They went, oh, these guys are going to find this hard. Let's change the task completely to something they can do, which,
Yeah.
strange sort of version of accessibility, isn't it? We're going to change it because we don't believe they can do things. So, your start point here is we do believe you can do just as much, or, you can certainly aim to do as much, but you may need some alteration here, and we can do that through the assist assistive technology, adaptive technology. What phrase would you use there?
Technically, like if you Google it or you Wikipedia it, it's assistive technology, but I kind of have a problem with that, even though I work for the world's largest assistive technology company. But the challenge of that is if you put assistive on it, it starts to introduce a bit of a stigma. Whereas if you go into a classroom and you go, I'm just giving you technology to help you rather than giving you assistive technology, it kind of twists the stigma a little bit. It's an and that's like one of those small changes. Let's stop talking about assistive technology to a degree, because if you just give everybody technology, they'll use it to assist them in different ways. That's so there's lots of small things happen. But you're right. I think a lot of and we'll be talking about this at the conference, talking about things like UDL, which obviously, the new ADEC policies for Abu Dhabi, very front and center of we need to embrace UDL. And the purpose of UDL really is to remove as many barriers as possible, but keep the goals the same.
Yeah.
So when you go to a student and you go, well, our goal and our outcome here is to be that, you can go, well, you have multiple paths to get that. It's like I describe it as like a ski map, where you can go, well, I'm going to take the black run, I'm going to take the red run, I'm going to take the nursery,
Yeah.
so you can take and you can still ultimately get down the mountain. You can still get to that learning goal, but you can be supported and you can have an easier transition that supports your individual level to get to the same place. But that's a mind shift change. That's a biggie, because a lot of the times, particularly at conferences, like ADTC, you sort of talk about these things. You go, oh, you got to change all this stuff. But I try and get across in our sessions and with what we do at TextHelp, it's not about, fundamental change. Nobody's saying everything you're doing, rip it up and be more inclusive. Like, it's like just tweak it slightly and actually you can help with the inclusion. And it's just good practice at that point. That's all it is.
And I think that's where the accessibility and the technology bit, because I wouldn't be Mr. Technology. I'm not a Luddite, but I wouldn't be Mr. Technology must be in everything I do. But I think when you're talking about things like this, when you talk about accessibility, this is where it becomes very easy for everyone to sort of appreciate and get their heads around the idea of how technology can support. Because teachers do remember dark days of three different worksheets for these kids, and
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one needs this, and change that whole lesson, and this bit can have that guy gets this lesson, this one. Whereas the technology can almost do it adaptive as the students are responding to
absolutely.
the levels of
Yeah,
challenge. And,
yeah.
you know, I can't think of an analogy for that, but it's almost like if it was back in the day, gladiators or some sort of tough mudder challenge. It's moving with your levels of competency, and that's obviously something that you guys, you know, you've said about the famous for the dyslexia, but I think that thing, the adaptive nature of the technology, is something that when I've heard people speak really well of what TextHelp do, it's to do with that as much as anything, the ease of implementation.
Yeah, and it's given, tools like that. So, and maybe I should explain for those of viewers and listeners who haven't seen the technology. We don't commonly, when you buy a piece of ed tech, you buy a thing that your students work in. So whether it's an LMS or it's a rote learning app, or it's some piece of thing you go to and you do things in it, and then there's an outcome. Well, ours is very different. So what we say is we appreciate that learning happens absolutely everywhere. So you may be reading something from a web page, you may be typing a Google Doc, you may be on your iPad playing with reading a PDF, you may be in a third party app helping with your mathematics. If those things, what we do is we layer on top of those. So we kind of put an extra set of buttons on top of all of those through our toolbar. And that means that wherever learning's happening, you get the same experience. So if you're going, I struggle with words on a page, I struggle with comprehension. What helps me is I can listen to the words everywhere. Well, what you don't want to do as a student is go to one point where you're learning in one area and you can press the play button and listen to it, and then you go to the next one. Oh, you don't have that. It's like your geography analogy earlier, it changes. So we put it then and we place that absolutely everywhere. And I think when you layer it on top of any potential places learning, you come back to the point, which is students can have their choice and their voice on that. They can go, "Well, actually, I like using this." And you think nowadays text to speech is really important, but you think of the amount of kids you're teaching and how many of them have their AirPods with them all day, every day. Do you know these are unobtrusive things that actually I'm not sitting there in the classroom with a headset and a boot microphone on. If it's permitted in the classroom, you could have your AirPods in and you could be listening to text to speech, and literally listening to English comprehension on the page, rather than your Spotify tunes. So that always a challenge there. But I think it's really important that you have the choice. And then students that would maybe mask things or wouldn't want to ask for help don't need to,
Yeah.
because they just choose to put the headphones in and press the play button, and then it goes with them. It adapts exactly as you say. And that's there's one of the things I dislike sometimes about the ed tech industry is everybody talks about workload. Oh, a teacher's workload is extreme, and we all know it is. But then people come along and say, we're going to save, 15% of your day with this new tool. And you go, are you really? But I'm just going to fill it with something else.
Yeah.
Even if you did save it. I think things like those assistive tools and the tools that we put in place, see if you're doing things like, right, we're now focused on differentiation. I'm going to have to make multiple different strands and multiple different streams, and I'm going to have to layer this. If you start to use the adaptive tools that you've talked about, you realize that it becomes far more personalized. And as a teacher, you haven't really had to do anything. Yes, there's onboarding with technology, but beyond that, it should go with the flow a bit better when we think about adaptive technology. And AI is a prime part of that, obviously now, and I'm sure that'll be there quite heavily at the conference for sure.
Yeah, I imagine you having to field numerous AI questions all day, but I'm sure you've got plenty to say about that as well. But yeah, that's definitely something that's at the forefront of the mind. But uh, what you guys were doing is almost AI before AI was AI. It is that kind of changing to meet the needs. That
Yeah.
seems to be how teachers are using it anyway.
We
Um,
were doing for years, Todd, we were doing predictive text, which was actually machine learning. It was effectively an early version of AI. We were looking at how does everybody type sentences when they're using our tools, and how can we better guess what the next word is. And of course, then it's on your phones, and we all have predictive text everywhere. But how do you get that in a classroom in context with, say, the topic that they're studying? How's the right word coming up related to the topic? Never mind how they might write. So that's all going on in the background. So when AI kind of, a couple of years ago, it was all AI central for everybody. And people would go, so what do you guys do at TextHelp? And we go, we've been doing it for years. And they just kind of look at you because I think there's a misconception that AI has to be very shiny and very like, look, it's just changed the world in one button. But actually, a lot of the really good bits of AI are sitting there in the background doing all these really cool things for learning. And they're not kind of an in your face, big red button, and suddenly you've got your latest, greatest Google Slides presentation. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are fantastic tools. But there's just a lot of things going on underneath the surface. And we've been doing a lot of that for quite some time. I mean, even things like our dictionaries. So in Read and Write, which is our big tool, it's very super simple thing. You can click a word and you can get a simplified dictionary of it. We've had that for years, and you get a picture reference to it. But now, of course, as AI is advanced, you can get that for any level of student you're at. Or if you go, right, I'm studying through the medium of English, but my first language is Arabic, or it's Spanish, or it's French, or it's Russian, whatever it happens to be. Then you can go, well, I don't understand the word in English, and I can't, I'm really not getting that definition. Well, then you just flip to Arabic, and it's going to give you the definition in Arabic as well. So AI helps with all that stuff, but that's kind of like under the hood, but it helps with accessibility, and that's what's important.
Definitely. And I think the thing you said there about people saying, "Oh, what are you going to do?" I think a lot of people, the technology the way in which they're using AI has been around for an awful long time. And so
Mm.
they're looking at it now like, well, this is all in one place, and therefore it's revolution. Someone said to me the other day, "Do you know with AI you can randomize a list?" No, do you know you've been able to do that on Excel for like anyway? Um, so, but I think the thing is it's become almost like a holding pen for a lot of things that have been around for an awful long time. But yeah, I definitely imagine you've got your first session and you've got a session at the end of the day as well. Is that
Yeah, we got, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think probably that bit in the middle there. I know you've got your individual sessions as well. But I think there's going to be a lot of people asking questions related to that, which will be, it's an engaging start to a conversation, certainly.
Yeah, there's kind of an end joke and running around the speaker kind of circuit of people like myself who end up being fortunate to travel to conferences and speak. And basically the running joke is all you do is do the same session you did 3 years ago, but you put the letters AI in front of it and you get 5 times as many people coming to it. But and there's a certain element of truth in that, of course, people come to that, but actually fundamentally a lot of the things that you're talking about, personalized learning, adaptability, simplification, all those things generally are much more powerful now because of AI. So of course there's an AI slant, but they're the same underlying good practice bits. So yeah, I am not guilty of that, but I do have, there is one of the sessions is an AI session. It's in the afternoon. Sorry, no, it's the later part of the morning. I've forgotten the schedule here. Todd, and in there, that's about not necessarily looking at how do we create resources or how do we do assessment, but that AI session is specifically around how do you make things more accessible, and not just how do you take it from reading age of 15 down to reading age of 5. It's how is actually fundamentally AI and the AI that's built into things now, whether it's Copilot or any of the tools there, making things more accessible. And really importantly for me, back to the point that you started on, how do you make it more personalized? Because that helps accessibility and inclusion. If it's more personalized, it's supporting you.
And maybe if it's appropriate for everyone to be reading the same text, but just everyone in a very different way, like you said with your mountain
Yeah.
analogy, you know, everyone's got the same challenging text, but we're just
Yeah.
going to give you this structure around it.
Yeah.
And for me, you mentioned that word stigma before. Um, I'm 38. I've got an English literature degree. I've got a very good set of A levels in both in English subjects. I was told when I was 17 that I was dyslexic,
Yeah.
um, because I had those good masking strategies. Now, you
Yeah.
wouldn't see many features of that. And at the time, was it a proper diagnosis? I don't know.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really struck me at the time was, I don't really want this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because there was a massive stigma in it. And I think tools like you know, tools like yours, they help to relieve a lot of that stigma around it. And they help for the conversation around these things to be, oh yeah, I just need this to get me to X so that I can fulfill my potential. And after all, that pretty much has to be the sector's entire aim, no? That we
Yeah.
are trying
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
maximize potential. Now, I
Yeah.
think in retrospect, mine was probably an incorrect diagnosis, but I certainly felt a stigma around it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are many people far more intelligent than I am who had hundreds of masking strategies and never even got the opportunity to explore that because of parents not wanting examinations, wanting to avoid that stigma. So I think that's what you've said there. The fact that it's adaptive, the fact that it can be in the classroom, the fact that it can be at that child's level and take them on their own sort of journey. I think that is massive beyond just learning, beyond the culture that creates as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really kind of excites me and makes me, those moments where sometimes your job is just your job and you just need those moments to go, "Ah, that's why I do this job." You just need those times. Everybody does, no matter what you say about your role. But there's so many times where I've went in, and actually I'll reference it in part of the opening section of the conference. So many times I've started to go into it when schools have adopted really good inclusive practices. They've embedded that piece of technology that's there. When you go into that classroom, you cannot see in that classroom and differentiate between a pupil with individual needs, different needs, special needs, whatever label you want to put on it. But you cannot see the difference because they're all sitting there. They've all got the same tools. They've all got the same sort of barrier free, not barrier free, but reduced barriers, even barriers to learning. And actually, it's almost impossible to see a pupil in that room that is any different or is behaving any different or engaging any different than any of the other pupils. And that's a very powerful thing to see because you're used to going in and going, well, that table there, or there's
Yeah.
three more learning assistants in that corner. And you're kind of going, okay, so clearly it's not meant to be the case, but they're marked out as different. It's getting with good use of technology and with good use of those sorts of strategies like UDL, which again we'll be covering at the conference. I think those are very powerful things to help that. And that's brilliant. And that's one of those moments where you're like, So I do what I do. This is it. It's made a difference.
Yeah, and actually that was exactly what I was going to ask you to end on, was one of those big moments. And do you want to just kind of talk about a specific example about UDL, or do you want to just expand on that? Because I think this is for a lot of people what they come to these conference with in mind is, give me a gem, give me something from under, give me a
Yeah.
little hope, 'cause I'm struggling over here. And I think in matters like this is one of those things that teachers are, people talk about, is it a vocation? I think it's a passion and it's a vocation.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of that. It's, you talked about everybody needs that in their job. I think teachers, we literally, that's the thing that we
Mm-hmm.
strive for and we thrive on, is those moments where you make that real difference and you see it. Do you want to talk a little bit more about UDL and perhaps one of those individual success stories, or I'm keen for you to
Yeah,
kind of share
yes,
one.
but it becomes harder and harder as I get that little bit older to pull out just one child. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree.
There's so many times through my life where, you've looked at it and you've had something like text to speech has literally given a pupil that doesn't have a voice. And I remember one from a very early time in text help. And this was in a special needs school, some pupils with severe learning, so mainstream school. And this young girl, I think she was 14 at the time, and really got me and really spurred me on to do what I'm doing now, because she had used the technology to win a speaking competition, and she had used the technology to do the writing and to actually do the speaking. And this was, I mean, this is going back maybe 15 years or so ago now. Like, it's a long time. So the technology was kind of in its infancy. But I had the parents come in, like they brought the parents in to meet me, to thank me. And all I'd ever done was literally at that time, I kid you not, I had sold something to this school and I had trained the teachers how to use it.
Yeah,
I felt I didn't contribute to that at all. I was just trying to help in my own way. That was my job. But seeing the power of that and how it had fundamentally changed her confidence, her life. And I'm very fortunate that with text help, I see things like that all the time. The line that I get all the time is, if it wasn't for reading and write, I wouldn't have. Like, and this is anything from, I wouldn't have got to this school. I wouldn't have finished my degree. And the very first time I hear that was a gentleman who came up to me in, I remember where it was. It was in Cardiff in Wales. And sometimes you're looking at technology and you're going, this is just a set of buttons on a page. And I know it's what I do and I'm very passionate about it. This is a page. How does that life changing? And he came up and he said to me, I had read and write through school, and I was only able to get through school, which got me to university, and I was able to do my PhD. And now, and he was able to tell me what he did there afterwards. And he went, if I didn't have that tool, I literally would not be standing here beside you now. And you just go, it's just a play button. It's just listening to words. And then you suddenly realize all these impacts that it has. And we hear that all the time. And we're very, we love student stories. In fact, we've got, just before the Abu Dhabi event, we've got Bet coming up
I,
in London. And so what we've done this year, normally, if anybody listening or watching has been to Bet, there's lots of presenters. It's the great and the good of the world of education technology, and everybody's there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful time. But we decided this year what we do is, actually all of our panel discussions are all students. So we have primary level students, we have secondary level students, we have students from special needs schools, students from mainstream schools. And so what you come and listen to there is, literally a 9-year-old going, this is why I love reading, right? Because it changed my life, because
yeah,
and we hear those all the time, and it's the best feeling for all of us. And you kind of go, this is what making change looks like. If I'm a little bit more accessible, if I'm a little bit more inclusive, if I provide the toolkits for learning, like, genuinely, people are getting help.
yeah.
It's really
And
exciting.
that those moments that you've spoken about, I'll not give the full quote 'cause it gets a bit sweary. But I always remember that thinking of there's a young man I taught in the UK, and he always made me think of, there's a John Lennon quote where he says, "Why has nobody discovered how clever I am?" And I always remember this. No, it gets awful sweary after.
Right.
But there was this young man, and I remember him basically saying that to me. He was like, I know so much and I can do so much. And every time I've got to sit down and do this stuff, it all just drops, it goes somewhere. And he was
Yeah.
like, but if I sit with you, I can tell you. And it's those children that I think, you're describing there. Oh, I won a speech competition because of you. Well, of course, yeah, that was a huge, huge factor, probably the key factor. But
Yeah.
how many of those students go without that key, that unlocking? And
No, I know. And like
it's,
last year, I met a young pupil who was, I had been told earlier she was massively passionate about drama, right? She just wanted to be on the stage, and she just wanted to have a career, right? And at that age, it's just like this burning desire. But her problem was that her reading ability was so low because of her dyslexia that actually when you give her lines and you give her scripts to read, it was a complete blocker. And you never think about these things, drama, literacy, right? So sometimes you just don't like them. So what she was doing with our technology was they were sending her the script, and they were sending her just as a Google Doc. And what she was doing was she was using our technology, and she could press a button on the technology, and instead of it reading it out, what it was doing, it spat it out as an MP3 file.
mm,
So for her, all she was doing was emailing that to her mobile phone, and on the train, in the car, headphones were in. So she was able to memorize all of those lines. So suddenly for her, she's like, the thing I thought that was going to prevent me now, whether she's success in drama or not, that's irrelevant. That's what she wanted to do. But now she's going, I had a blocker. I was never going to get there, but now I'm going to get there because I have a technology powered way that just plays this back as if it were an audiobook, and I just keep going over it and learn the lines by listening to it. Small, small, small thing, but massive for her.
That's the massive impact, isn't it? And I think that's the big
Yeah.
thing for teachers, and those teachers that are going to come and watch any or all of your talks on Saturday, the 2nd of February, as we said. That's going to be the thing that they're going to get to see and hear about. They're going to get to hear about those small things that can make such a huge difference. And as you said, maybe for that child, maybe she'll never be an Oscar winner, but what she will be is she will be able to sit with herself and go, thanks to that technology, I got to see exactly how much potential was in the bank and do something I love at the standard that I knew I could.
Oh, and
And
plus the confidence that that delivers, like
100%.
and the impact that has on all aspects of your life. Suddenly, like, okay, no, there's a way I can do this. That's fine,
Yeah.
no matter what she ends up doing.
Yeah, the more competence we have, the more confident we feel, don't we? And if you've got a blocker for that, then obviously there's well-being issues that then stop. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think we said one example, and we've both given about three or
There
four.
you go.
I think we could go and go and go. So what we'll do is we'll break these up because I think we've absolutely covered the ground of um, what TextHelp is, what you do, and who it can help, and some great stories there at the end in particular. And I fully advise people to go and listen to you at the conference and to learn more. There's a blog on the TextHelp website that people can kind of dip into. That's a great start point. But we will record a few more of these because I think we could definitely go into depth, and I think we need to think carefully about the products and kind of give people a little bit of an overview of those, and then perhaps we'll come back to this idea of accessibility and inclusion because I think that we're kind of on a thread here, and I'm I feel terrible stopping us, but equally I know that people like these kind of 20, 30-minute ones, and we're in danger of going on for, oh, I could go
That's
for
right.
hours. What do you think?
Of course, yeah, no problem. I'm with you on
We'll
that.
pause there and we'll give everyone a breather. Thank you, Paddy.